Why did the most hyped sneaker designer of the moment refuse to work with Nike? Salehe Bembury is the rising star of the sneaker industry with free reign wherever he goes, and absolutely all brands are ready to work with him. Bembury could have easily made a significant place for himself at the top of the heap with Adidas or Nike, but surprisingly he has never designed anything with these brands. And on the contrary, he tends to work with quote-unquote less prominent brands in the sneaker game. We've seen him with brands that are almost out of date, like Crocs or New Balance at the very beginning of the hype when the hypebeasts weren't really paying attention to them yet. Brands that you might not even know at all, like Insta or Brand Black. And we've also seen him with very big brands like Versace and Moncler, but they're clearly not at the top in terms of sneakers. What's very surprising is that despite his undeniable talent, this ultra-renowned designer has never worked with Nike or Adidas, who are the undisputed leaders of the market and in search of the best designers, and it gets even worse. Bembury was approached by Nike to work with them, and he simply turned them down, even though he says he's always been inspired and motivated by Nike. Why is Bembury such a different designer who seems to be moving away from the hype but always ends up attracting it? Is he really that talented, or is he just another overrated designer? We'll try to dissect his story and his designs to learn a little more about one of the top designers of the moment. At least that's how he's presented.
Salehe Bembury, welcome.
Hello. New video alert after one of my last videos where you all accused me of being a hater because I was brutally honest about Sean Wotherspoon. Well, now it's time to take a closer look at Salehe Bembury, one of the most popular and prolific designers of the moment. But is he really worth it? He has been churning out collaborations like nobody else. But what's even more surprising is that he's one of the star designers out there and he has little to no haters. When we think of Virgil, despite all the success and top-notch pairs he has released, there's still a lot of controversy and haters who have come after him. And Kanye, well, don't even get me started on him. He gets lit up for his designs or for darker reasons. And lastly, Sean, well, he's often seen as the king of flops. And it's almost like there are more people who talk down on his work than those who are actually fans. But with Bembury, who is ultra well known in the sneaker community, you very rarely hear people speak badly of him. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk shit about the dude.
It's quiet. Too quiet.
So am I officially becoming the very first hater of Salehe Bembury? To form an opinion about him, as usual, we need to provide some historical context. Bembury is a guy who grew up in New York in a family that was not particularly rich or poor. His father was a photographer, and it's probably thanks to him that Salehe had a creative spirit from an early age. Unlike Kanye West or Sean Wotherspoon, Salehe did not stumble into shoe design by accident. It was something he had always wanted to do, which is why he studied industrial design at Syracuse University. After graduating, he quickly found a job working at Payless, and I know that don't sound too glamorous. He mainly had to design cheap-ass shoes with a lot of constraints. He was told more or less everything he had to do, and he was very limited in his artistic positions and material choices. So the whole idea of Payless is to sell cheap shoes, so the use of expensive materials or extravagant concepts was totally out of the question. Boy, it was a very frustrating situation for Bembury, who had originally aimed to create shoes that were more impactful than $12 discounted shoes. However, with hindsight, he realized that it was still an important experience that helped him get to the next level of design.
Fair enough.
To continue his progress, he left Payless to work at Cole Haan, a shoe brand that had been owned by Nike since the late 80s. And it was there that he began to flourish more in design, since even though they were still pairs for your granddaddy, there was still a real challenge in incorporating Nike technology into designs that didn't necessarily lend themselves to it. He participated in creating the Lunar Grand, a classic shoe with soles that reused Nike's Lunar Lun technology. And it was also while working there where he met his first mentor, Jeffrey Henderson, who had worked for Yeezy and later helped him connect with Kanye West, who would become his second mentor. But before he got there was still a little way to go, and he would leave his designer position once again for the same reasons as to why he left Payless. Nike had decided to sell Cole Haan after 30 years to focus on the swoosh brand, and the goals of the new leaders were no longer quite in line with Nike, where they wanted to innovate, use new technologies, etc. Now they're rather rather a group of investors who just wanted to make money on products that were already selling well. And for Bembury, well, that really wasn't meant for him anymore. Fortunately, he was a proactive guy who spent his time sending emails, DMs on LinkedIn, and scoring ads to find new positions. And he quickly managed to find a new job at a brand new company that had just been created when he arrived. Greats, a not too well-known American brand founded in 2014 by the company Steve Madden, who is a little better known, at least in the United States. He started there in 2015, and he made some pairs that obviously weren't groundbreaking for sneakerheads. And unfortunately, he was fired overnight after a little over a year of loyal service with them.
And I'm the first person to stand up and say, this is fucked, this is not right, this is not cool.
He was beginning to have doubt, but he would not let himself be defeated, and he continued to approach brands. He contacted someone on LinkedIn who eventually offered him a position at United News, a brand that makes really funky looking shoes and that could speak to Bembury. But in the meantime, Jeff would hook him up, and it would eventually lead him to a job at Yeezy. It was Yeezy's season, so nothing to do with Adidas, but Bembury was completely hyped at the idea of working for Kanye. And even if he was just a designer in the background, it was a form of consecration for him, because he was finally working for a brand that had a little more impact on the culture. He contributed to some pieces in season 3 and 4, and he really did thrive at the job. He even saw himself staying there. But it would all stop abruptly once again, and from there, everything became complicated for him. He was the kind that always found a job fairly quickly, especially a job that always had a little bit more scope. But this time, the mailbox was kinda empty. For an entire year, he lived the unemployed life. His finances were getting worse as the months went on. And he, who was a picky designer that made things extra difficult before even starting to work on a project. During this period, he would do designs for anybody, even brands he wasn't proud of, but he had to eat. With all of this going on, he was going through one of the biggest crises of his life. He even lost the pleasure of designing sneakers and was so close to giving up on his dreams. But however, a DM on LinkedIn would forever change his life. One day, he gathered the courage to DM a designer director at Versace to explain to him how to do his job. And he had the right to do so, because at that moment in history, Versace wasn't really delivering nothing special. They was just giving us some high top sneakers that looked just like any other luxury brand. At Versace, you had these. At Givenchy, they were selling his doppelganger, and brands were not really standing out from the rest of the competitors. Whether it was Givenchy, Louis Vuitton, and so on, they all kind of went in the same directions. Except for Balenciaga, because they were already setting themselves apart. In his LinkedIn DM, Salehe wrote a small essay to explain the opportunity of luxury sneakers and how to stand out like Balenciaga. His message was taken so seriously to the point that he was invited for a meeting directly with Donatella Versace in Milan, all because of one DM on LinkedIn.
What a move!
Versace needed to expand its range of sneakers, and this young designer who had worked for Yeezy was exactly what they needed. They provided him with a lot of resources, and the bet paid off, as he released the Versace Chain Reaction, the biggest banger of Versace's history. Not only did he come up with the product idea, but also to associate it with the rapper 2 Chainz, who directly agreed to be the ambassador of the pair. While yes, because it is Versace, but also because the chain theme matched his name. And according to Bembury, because as a black American like 2 Chainz, the connection was easier to make. He made several pairs until he became the footwear vice president at Versace. And well, clearly not all of his pairs were a hit, but his Chain Reaction and Trijeca were spot on in Versace's design aesthetic. He really succeeded in creating beautiful pairs that were 100% in line with the brand's spirit. And these strokes of genius will quickly attract all other brands. As he became more and more solicited everywhere, and also because he felt like he had done everything, he eventually left Versace. It was then that the general public really discovered him thanks to his collaborations with New Balance, Crocs, Anta, Clarks, and Moncler. Well, those who have followed the sneaker world has seen his face absolutely everywhere and at all times these past couple of years.
Hi again, it's me.
What's really going to stick in people's minds are his Crocs, his 2002 Rs, and his chain reaction. The rest of his pairs are clearly not flawless. Some of them are just more anecdotal, like his collab with Anta, which I found to be pretty dope. But his Clarks are straight up shameful. It's something like a high school art teacher would wear. His 57 4s look like a spaceship from Dragon Ball Z, like Frieza's about to pop out any moment. And those collabs with Brand Black could pass for SpongeBob merchandise. Literally, he started his own brand, Be a Sponge, because he thinks it's important to soak up everything around us. He also created his very own visual identity with his fingerprint patterns that he nicely adapted into 3D onto his Croc designs, sort of inspired by what he's done on the Versace chain reaction sole. Looking at his collabs, you can see inspiration from nature, hiking vibes, and bright colors that you usually don't see. Basically, it's exactly like Sean Wotherspoon, but without all the flops, or at least with a fewer flops, and it's probably because Bembury chose freedom over everything. Unlike Sean Wotherspoon, who's for sure being told what to do when it comes to certain models, Bembury has the luxury of turning down projects he doesn't want to do, and he uses it. He famously turned down Nike over a year ago, even though it was his dream job when he was younger, but he realized freedom is priceless. Now he signed for 2 years with Crocs as the creative director of the Pollux Pod collection. And even though it might seem crazy to turn down Nike for a contract offer with Crocs, there's a good chance that beyond money and fame, he has total freedom over what he wants to design. So was it a good career move? Only time will tell, but it does seem like a good personal move in line with his values. But is he really a top designer as the way that he presents himself? Over 60% of people on Instagram surely does think so, and I am inclined to agree. He's a kind of guy who knows how to create intelligently, as we saw with his creations for Versace, which was very true to the brand's heritage, and that's probably why he doesn't have any haters. He's a designer who earned his spot, who hasn't taken any shortcuts, and who has really learned and made his own way in the industry. Some might have a different opinion about Sean Wotherspoon, who wasn't originally a designer, but he did make a name for himself with only one pair of shoes. Or Kanye, who was a star that used his fame to climb to the ranks of the sneaker game. The same goes for Virgil Abloh, who owed some of his success to his connections in the industry. When people criticize these types of designers, it's usually about their legitimacy or whether they really design their own shoes. Personally, even though I do consider Bembury one of the top designers of the moment, I'm not necessarily a huge fan. His gorpcore nature-inspired aesthetic doesn't really speak to me. I preferred his work with Versace when he had to stay within the brand's artistic direction. But that doesn't mean that I don't respect his work or even find it interesting. It's actually the opposite. I am very curious to find out what he comes up with in the future. So what do you think of his creations? Do you think that he's actually a top-notch designer?
I probably do it again like how he do it. I been through some things, but that pain got a nigga paid. I go round it, find out, I fuck up your day. I say give me headshot, and she don't do it, Simon say. Color-coded diamonds, water falling like precipitation, yeah. Miss your call, cause I was